Hello, and welcome to today's KraneShares webinar, the Party Congress and Policy Look and Q3 Market Review. My name is Brendan Ahern. I'm the Chief Investment Officer of KraneShares Exchange Traded Funds. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Xiaolin Chen, our London National, and David Adelman, our General Counsel and retired U.S. Ambassador to Singapore. On Sunday, President Xi spoke for 2 hours, commencing China's week-long Party Congress, which occurs every 5 years. Xiaolin spent her Sunday reading the original text, which is China's equivalent to a presidential inaugurational speech or State of the Union. The timing of the Party Congress also provides an opportunity for investors to better understand the mechanics of China's government. We have also prepared a thorough examination of President Xi's speech, along with implications for investors. During today's presentation, please feel free to ask questions as we hope for a lively question and answer post-presentation. If you've joined us via Zoom, questions can be asked in the Q&A button on your screen. If you've joined us on KraneShares.com, please email us any questions at info@KraneShares.com. Let's briefly provide an introduction to those of you less familiar with KraneShares. KraneShares founder Jonathan Crane formed 2 core beliefs during his experience living and building a successful business in China. These 2 beliefs were the basis for founding KraneShares back in 2012. First, while new China sectors such as domestic consumption, internet, e-commerce, 5G, semiconductors, clean energy, and healthcare have become the new drivers of China's economic growth, these sectors are still underallocated in global portfolios. Second, the opening of China's mainland equity markets, the second largest in the world, and China's mainland fixed income market, also the second largest in the world, will have a significant effect on investors' portfolios in the years to come as those markets are included into global indices. Most importantly, we endeavor to earn the trust of investors through our balanced perspective on China's economy and capital markets. China's rise in market indices, along with its economy, will necessitate investors have a partner to navigate these developments. KraneShares wants to earn that partnership role with you. We maintain a daily research blog that is available at www.chinalastnight.com, which we encourage you to subscribe to in order to keep abreast of developments as they occur. Once again, please send all questions via the Q&A button or to info@KraneShares.com. Taking Jonathan Crane's beliefs, we built a thorough suite of new China as well as access into China's onshore capital markets. We've also broadened our exposure to take advantage of another significant trend for the next years and decades to come by building out a suite of climate-oriented exchange-traded funds. With that, let's dive right into the Party Congress. Now, Xiaolin, I know your weekend was a little bit different than you may have expected. That President Xi spoke for 2 hours and you diligently read through the text. But I think it might be kind of interesting if we just step back, for those of us who ply our wares in the China business, the Party Congress is, this every 5-year event. And we know that there'll be several potential leadership changes due to retirement. But not all of our investors are maybe as familiar with some of the mechanics or the importance of the Party Congress, or how does say the Politburo or the Standing Committee, how does that fit into the hierarchy of the Chinese government? Maybe would you mind just maybe kind of briefly giving just a basic overview of how these different committees kind of fit together?
Absolutely, Brendan. I think I had a lot of fun of going through this opening remarks report delivered by Xi Jinping on Sunday. I live in London. For those of you who don't know me, Xi Jinping delivered the report at 10 o'clock local time, so that's 3 a.m. and I wake up at 2 o'clock, wandering around for about an hour like, what do I do? So I'm a little earlier than Xi Jinping does. So we got the full report. It's a great pleasure reading through that whole report, and it's a benefit, I think, at KraneShares that, we read the report. We read the original report, let's put it this way. It's in Chinese, it's exactly word by word what he meant in his report. He covers every aspect. We take the takes out of the report, the original report, with our own eyes of what has said. So we interpreted it very accurately and correctly in many ways we could. So a bit of a, like Brendan, you say, a bit of a background. This is a 5-year event. Every 5 years you host this event. What it is really does is the Communist China Communist Party giving a review of their 5 years performance as a party, also as a leader of the country, and also provide a blueprint for the country in the next 5 years. So that's why repeatedly you saw Brendan's notes on China last night, emphasizing how important this meeting is, this Congress is. And then a little bit of onto the event itself. A couple of things we would watch very closely in this event is obviously, how did they think they did? What guidance they provided in the report? And thirdly, is most important, also the people. When you say this is an election of the Communist Party leaders, hence that impact the entire leadership of the country. Who get elected? Quite a lot from top to bottom. But what is most important is what on this page is saying the 25 member and the 7 Politburo Standing Committee members. So how do you think of that? That 7 people is the most trusted inner circle in the government, in the policy making, in the outlook, in the economic, in national security, in all aspects that will drive and decide the directions for China as a government or as a leader to take from here and there. So this is very important, deciding the people. Obviously, at this stage, the meeting kicked off on Sunday, the 16th of October. It won't conclude until 22nd of October. So it's a week long. And on the 23rd, the following day, which is the new leadership, the 7 people will be unveiled. You will see the people. At the moment, no point of speculating any names whatsoever. You won't know, just be patient for a few more days. You'll learn exactly who those people are. I'm sure Brendan will cover it more in China last night at that point to give you a bit of a understanding explanation. But let's understand a little bit of what we already know thus far. We read through the entire report. Xi Jinping gave the report over 2 hours time. Brendan, shall I cover on a little bit about what we see in the report from here? What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think one interesting aspect is that you have this implied retirement age,
True.
And we won't know who these 7 people are until they literally walk out on stage and in the order. But I think the implied retirement age is interesting, Xiaolin. It's something that here in the United States there's been talk about trying to have potential age limits, but it's something that is interesting that China has this element to its governance, and that's I think something that I can't think of another country that has such an interesting role, but at times we've seen some of these players actually exceed that retirement age. So like the Vice Premier Liu He, who's Vice Premier, but also the trade envoy, you can't have your trade envoy retire during a trade war. So he actually stayed on. So I guess that's some of the speculation of who's going to stay, who's going to go because of this age limit. You think that's accurate, Xiaolin?
To a certain extent, it is. And then to some of the people's, I'd say in a crucial role, like you said, they will have a successor in place. You have younger aged leaders come in that, work alongside with them to be prepared as a successor. The age thing is, I think it's a soft rule. It's a preferred, it's not a hard rule. Certain situation, like you said, during the US trade war discussions, they kept on the leadership. So they have the experience and knowledge that familiarized with the issues and the situations, so they will be very well, accurate to answer questions and address issues. So that could be certain exceptions can be made. And then, a lot of the leaders in the past was elected when they were slightly elder, like Jiang Zemin, and Hu Jintao obviously prepared for his terms after Jiang Zemin, and then Xi Jinping took over from Hu Jintao. I think it's preferred, but it's not a very much of a hard rule that is right, stop there. So that probably lead us to firmly believe this is a secured term for Xi Jinping as a third term.
Okay. And I think what's interesting to me is that obviously as foreigners we have access to the speech, but it's really given for the Chinese people. That this is it's more of a inward domestic oriented speech as opposed to something that can be was kind of meant for this foreign audience. And I think that's a key difference. Kind of an interesting point just for people to take note that this was really written for the domestic population, right? But so let's dive in. On the next slide, we highlight some of the political, some of the implications for investors. I thought it's interesting, Xiaolin, that you have people literally counting the number of times that modernization was said 85 times, as opposed to 47 times at the 19th Party Congress. Innovation was mentioned 55 times, education 50, technology 43. It's very that shows the level of scrutiny given to the speech. But my sense was that this was very geared to the economy. I'm kind of curious, having read through it yourself, what your main takeaways that we as investors should be aware of.
Can I just say I was probably one of the also that going through his report looking for some keywords. I was looking for, is he going to say more regulations, more reforms? That's dear to my heart of is the regulations, tightening cycle behind us or not. I was reading through his report a couple of times to trying to get a sense and deep dive of he would touch those or not. I did count some of those words. I didn't count everything. And I also gone through his report, or before I, reading through his 2 hours report was, I want to get a clear, or as much as I could, on what is the policy that in his mind, what are the guidance he's going to set at this level. He's only going to set a very high level of guidance and directions for the country to take. I want to get a breadth of what he's going to say in his report. I'd say I'm pleasantly surprised by the length of the policies, the growth, the people, so on and so forth he mentioned in his report. So if for those who read his report, he literally had 15 sections. And then the first section was review the performance of the party, of the country leader. And then the rest of the 14 sections touch base on a lot of issues. Out of that 14, 11 sections was really in all aspects and different angles, touch base on the policies, domestic policies, international affairs, economic policies, national security, so on and so forth. Give me a lot of details to digest, more than I would anticipate. So I'm pretty happy after read his report because we got a lot of reassurance. I give you a couple of take, Brendan, is I get asked quite often is, does he care about economic growth? After reading that report, the answer is definitely yes. The reason I say that is he obviously appraised his achievements as a leader, as a country. He then straight away addressed the issues, the challenges faced by the country, during the 5-year time and ahead. He is acknowledging the situation. Then he went on setting the policies, all of the policies centered around the people, to make the people more wealthier, higher income. He mentioned getting the 100 million lowest income possible families very in the poor situation out of the poverty. He also mentioned he wants high quality growth. He wants China to focus on modernization, society. He touched base on the real estate, but at a high level, he preferred to set proper systems to deal with real estate, so on and so forth. He also mentioned a lot of the green initiative, for instance, the One Belt, One Road, the green, the carbon. Once in his report, I think in 3 places he mentioned that even you have a gold mountain or silver mountain, it's not as wealthy as worthwhile if you have a green scenery. So that's just to praise his commitment and determined to deliver the green commitments. In all these aspects, you would imagine, how can China achieve that without growing the economy, which they will. And I take 2 other key points, and I just pause, let you to jump in. Is he said 2 other things. One is he said milestones for Chinese party or Chinese leader to deliver. By 2035, he wanted society to be medium modernized. That means, a lot of people would be higher income, better GDP per capita. By middle of the century, he wants China to be a truly highly, developed and modernized society. He then go on and said the next 5 years, means from now to the next 5 years before the next party Congress, is a crucial period for China to deliver all these goals. That's indicate to me very clearly that he acknowledged the growth needs for the country. He will do everything, anything could support the economy to grow. And if you look back to in history, typically these kind of like period of indication to deliver for corporate to action is usually come together with the policymaker to provide a bit of accommodative policy, helping the corporate to deliver, execute, to put them in action. So that, to me, if you ask me, is good for market.
Yeah, I thought I would agree. If common prosperity, you need prosperity, and I think you have this very important political meeting that a lot of initiatives were put on the back burner. I think because there was such an emphasis on making sure that you have a job for the next 5 years, and I think we started to see some proverbial green shoots on some of the policy enhancement, and I thought there was a very clear emphasis on the economy, and we feel like that's a good thing for domestic consumption, which flows through the companies we hold in KWeb, our KraneShares China Internet. Certainly healthcare, the last 2 trading days has responded pretty dramatically to some of the emphasis on addressing China's low birth rate. But at the same time, on the self-reliance, David, I think that's something that we've seen some recent U.S. government policies toward semiconductor exports to China. But clearly this speech was written well in advance, though you could argue we've seen this trajectory coming. But kind of curious, your read, putting your diplomatic hat on. I'm sure Xi's speech was very well read in Washington, D.C. But was there anything that kind of jumped out to you just from some of the emphasis on technological self-reliance?
Yeah, there really was, Brendan, and thanks. I think the point that this is a State of the Union speech that is directed at President Xi's and the party's domestic audience is right. But look, every world leader has a domestic audience through which he or she must consider international relations and the country's foreign policy, and certainly China is no exception. And of course, the report and the developments over the remainder of this week are being watched very closely, not just in Washington, but in all of the world's capitals. I wanted to comment on, I guess, 2 things that are very front of mind for most investors, and they both relate to the context in which this speech was delivered over the weekend. First is war in Europe and how China is positioned to realize its potential and goals of modernization in light of the instability and sort of lack of predictability with regard to Eastern Europe and specifically Russia and Ukraine. We're very lucky at KraneShares. We have a broad network of thinkers. We consulted with Dr. Kissinger, former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. We talked regularly to important U.S. policymakers and former diplomats. Some of you may have participated in a webinar we did last year with former U.S. Ambassador Max Baucus. Others may have participated in our in-person conferences in Europe just last month, where we hosted former U.S. Ambassador in Beijing, Terry Branstad. And this network helps, I think, us to try to come to some consensus, some understanding of the context in which these domestic policies are formed. I look at not an American diplomat, but one of my counterparties when I served representing the United States in Singapore, former Singapore Foreign Minister George Yeo, who has sort of taken a very close look at this China, US, Russia dynamic and concluded that China was really sitting pretty. The ability to pursue this friendship without limitations with Putin so that China can realize the access to energy resources, oil and gas, from Russia to help it pursue this, 10 or 20-year modernization program, but at the same time, sort of continuing its access to European and American markets. And, I commend anyone to take a look at the interview that George Yeo did with Bloomberg a couple of weeks ago. And I think you'll find that it's especially prescient in light of the statements about China's economic modernization that came out of this weekend's report. I think the second part of this whole European context and Russia context, frankly, relates to some of the battlefield difficulties the Russian military is obviously experiencing on the ground in Ukraine. Many people would say, oh, that's a cautionary tale, and China and sort of others are looking at that very closely to consider the state of their own military for purposes of, pursuing whatever their security objectives would be. I give less weight to that, although I suppose if you want to treat that as a cautionary tale that security policy makers in Beijing might consider, I think that's a fair point. And that oftentimes bridges the conversation, Brendan and Xiaolin, as you know, into this discussion of Taiwan and how it all fits in. And I guess I'll make a couple of observations about the report. First, I was struck, frankly, by how little discussion there was of tensions across the Strait of Taiwan in the report. I think, many foreign policy hands expected there to be some big pronouncements, but I think the fact that President Xi gave some appropriate attention to the issue, but did not spend much time on Taiwan or any security matters, I think emphasizes the point you all have made over the last couple of minutes, and that is then we can expect the next 10 or 20 years, this plan that was laid out in President Xi's report to really be about the modernization of China's economy for purposes of promoting the Chinese people, this domestic audience, giving this domestic audience the confidence they need to pursue the China dream, as President Xi has put in past speeches. And so I think the status quo with regard to Taiwan is very powerful. President Xi has, I think, very consistently spoken about the status quo as being satisfactory generally for China's international relations. And I think that case is even stronger now. So for those who were looking for something dramatic to conclude about Taiwan relations or cross-strait relations, I think they would be disappointed, because I think that President Xi seems to be adhering pretty closely to what has been China's policy, and for that matter, the American policy over the last 20 years, and that is to preserve the status quo with regard to the Taiwan Strait. And similarly, leaders in Taipei I think, have made it very clear that they're not interested in a de jure declaration of independence or any other pronouncement that might trigger Chinese law or otherwise provoke China's security policymakers. Now, you asked the question about semiconductors, Brendan, and I think the news out of Washington, President Biden's order on export controls, similarly has to be considered in the broader context of international relations and the domestic audience that President Biden has. And just to sort of back up for a minute, for those of us who are not sort of well-versed in export controls, one needs to keep in mind that the American export control regime is about security. When I served at the State Department and spent time with policymakers at the Pentagon, at the time led by Secretary of Defense Robert Gates, we spent a lot of time talking about, building higher fences around the crown jewels of American technology. That is to protect the American technology that American security and the military depends on almost exclusively. The spirit of our export control policy at the time was to allow American industries to pursue foreign markets and to liberally export its products, including technology, so long as those products were not of a type that the U.S. military depended upon for purposes of defending American national interests. And in that regard, I think the Biden order is a little bit different. Because the Biden order, I think, does not purely speak to military security, but is also about the economic security of the United States. It should come as no surprise that big countries want to ensure redundancy and want to ensure access to critical path technologies, and semiconductors and the modernization, the modern foundry equipment used to produce semiconductors falls squarely within that category. So Biden using the export control regime for purposes of protecting or pursuing America's independent access to semiconductors, again, should come as no surprise. I think a lot has been made of viewing this in the context of U.S.-China relations, but I would suggest that it should be viewed more broadly in the context of all international relations. And I think we can expect China to similarly engage in its own protective policies for purposes of ensuring that it also is not dependent on any other country, not just the United States, but on any other country for its critical path technologies as they relate to its security. So, my takeaway on both the Ukraine and war in Europe issues, as well as this discussion over export controls and as it relates to semiconductors, is that both Washington and Beijing are acting very rationally. They're doing exactly what we would expect them to do for purposes of protecting their access to technology and protecting their ability to promote their own national security. So I guess with regard to the report that came out of the Party Congress over the weekend, this is kind of a no news is good news on the security front. And I think that's exactly what we're taking away here at KraneShares from the report on security, that this was really a speech about the modernization and promotion of a Chinese economy, perhaps a continued promotion of the dual circularity, China's domestic economy. At the same time, it is going to increase its cross-border activity, but less about security and tensions across the Taiwan Strait or about security and tensions in Europe.
Yeah, and I know, David, one of your highlights, representing our country, and thank you for your service. You've mentioned that you had the opportunity to meet Lee Kuan Yew, who was really the founder and the leader of modern Singapore, and was almost considered like the consigliere to China's top leaders. And one of your conversations was around just the long run situation with Taiwan, and I think your belief is that China plays the long game, that Taiwan is very oriented to to China. And China's belief would be more of you at some point you want Taiwan to be part of China.
Yeah, listen,
Right.
I mean, I think we all need to be very clear-eyed about this. And President Xi's report was not ambiguous. The Chinese view Taiwan and the Taiwan situation as an unresolved civil war, if you will. They very much view Taiwan as part of China, and that will not change. That is the status quo, in fact. And you mentioned Lee Kuan Yew, and Lee Kuan Yew, I think, if nothing else, is recognized for his terrific ability to balance Beijing and Washington. And many will credit Singapore's great success to his agility in sort of navigating the two elephants, as he oftentimes put it, China and the United States. And he, I think, continually emphasized China's ability to be patient, especially with regard to Taiwan. And you don't have to take his word for it. I think the record is clear. China clearly is playing this long game, and I think China is playing a game about trade and investment dependency, and the idea that Taiwan will continue to have a growing trade and investment dependency on the powerful Chinese economy, which will eventually, I suppose, President Xi and his inner circle believe ultimately lead to the goal of Taiwan becoming a part of China. One country, two systems, one country, two interpretations. You can decide how you want to characterize it. But I think patience is the order of the day, and I don't think anything that came out of the report would cause anyone to think otherwise. Now, I know that policymakers, even the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, will sort of go through the report and appropriately, I think, find places to create some urgency in the United States around the issue. And that is, I think, a good thing for him to do for purposes of keeping Taiwan very much front and center for American security purposes. But I think the important conversations are the quiet conversations that don't happen in the public speeches or on Twitter. And I think what Washington is concluding in those private conversations is that Beijing seems to be interested in continuing with the status quo, especially as it relates to Taiwan.
Okay, no, that's fantastic, David. And yeah, we've got some more questions that we'll address. On the next slide, let's talk, maybe pivot back a little bit to some of the investor implications that we spoke about. I think the emphasis on healthy economic development, so the tolerance for lower rates of percentage GDP growth, but healthier, so less debt driven. But I think one of the key implications that we saw even leading up to the Party Congress was these kind of proverbial green shoots on several important areas that, in speaking and interacting with our end clients, the things that have made them concerned. And I think the zero COVID, or in China, it's called the lives first policy. You could argue that we're starting to see, some watered down, or the tempering of some of the strict economic consequence. And I think that's something that for many investors, they saw what happened, that when not only the city, but the province and the port of Shanghai were all closed, that it had a very significant economic consequence. I mean, upwards of 25% of GDP were affected. And we've seen a tempering of that strict quarantine. And I think that's because it's recognized that, yes, you want to prevent the spread of COVID. This is really driven by low vaccination rates across China's elderly population. And yet you're seeing a bit of a pivot. And I think that's something that many investors haven't quite recognized, that you're seeing just even overnight, two Chinese airlines mentioned that they're going to resume their international flights. You're seeing a pretty significant change in terms of Hong Kong policies, a very clear loosening. And that's despite, COVID is still spreading in Hong Kong, but you see a higher tolerance. Just so I think you're seeing a little bit of a balancing, and potentially you had the introduction of a domestic mRNA vaccine, but maybe when you get through the winter, the proverbial flu season, you see a further relaxation of this policy that's been a concern. I think the other area of concern has been around real estate. And we've always felt that real estate was a bit of a balancing act between the high level of wealth from Chinese households, at the same time, trying to disincentivize this malinvestment, that China doesn't need any more cement buildings. They need that investment to go into semiconductors, biotech, these new technologies that the Chinese economy will need. At the same time, you have to address and deal with the property developers that took on vast amounts of debt, like a Evergrande and a Country Garden, and amongst others. And we're seeing that balancing act taking place. There's clear measures of support there. But I think the key for myself is that many of these issues have weighed on investor sentiment. And as we see a relaxation around some of these issues, or an improvement, I think there's a real opportunity, because these markets have come down year to date. And I just firmly believe that potentially we're at or near the bottom, and certainly see that there's a real opportunity as the Chinese government pivots to really focus on the economy. That I just don't think it can be more emphasized that you've had a significant focus within the Chinese government around this party Congress, that you had to make sure that you have a seat for the next 5 years, or else the train is leaving the proverbial station without you. And now that, within a few days, we'll have the conclusion, and I think you'll see a real, our anticipation is you'll see a real pivot to getting this economy going. And I think this is potentially a real opportunity for investors. And certainly we feel very constructive on the opportunity set at hand. And with that, we'll maybe get into a few of the questions that we had come in. One of the questions was around what happened with Russia. And I think what has almost scared investors was that you had these restrictions placed. And I think something that we've tried to tell investors is that China's economy is far more integrated in the global economy than the Russian economy. And I think that's one of the clear differentiators, is that China is not just so much bigger than Russia's, but it's so much more integrated. And I thought it was interesting, David, that already both the heads of state from both France and Germany are planning to visit China for the first time since COVID next month. And I think we've highlighted here the importance of the China's economy with the U.S. economy, but that's very true for Europe as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. Look, I mean, there are many ways to think about the distinction between China and Russia as it relates to the relative integration with the global economy. The easiest way to do it is just size. China's the second largest economy in the world. Russia, I don't know where Russia is today, Brendan, after sanctions, outside of the top 20, perhaps. But the more important point is this point of integration. And unlike Russia, with the massive Chinese economy, its market and frankly, its manufacturing, production, and export of services as well, Europe and the US have a stake in the economic success of China, in the same way that China has a stake in the economic success of Europe and the United States. In some ways, for international relations scholars, this is an ideal posture for the United States and China to be in to find diplomatic solutions. That they're sort of in the same boat, although you won't hear politicians speak of it in those terms. That is the fact, and that really has been what has developed over the last 50 years since normalization with China, and in particular since China was welcomed into the WTO and the rules-based global trading system. So China and the United States and Europe, they all need each other, and they depend upon each other's success. And that's the story of these past 50 years. So, what will be the story of the next 50 years? I would suggest it's the continued development of the interdependency between sort of the three massive economies in the world today: the European Union economy, the American economy, and the rising Chinese economy.
Yeah, and certainly, we always like to highlight that there's many great U.S. multinational companies have done great business in China, very reliant, an element of their revenue to the Chinese economy. And, I think there's an understanding that you don't want to do anything that could jeopardize this great opportunity for U.S. as well as European and global multinationals to operate in China today. So
that's precisely the interdependence we're talking about. I mean, the massive percentage of China's export of goods that come from multinational corporations, many of which are American, but others of which are European, really tells the whole story. There really is no case for damaging China's manufacturing base that doesn't bring sort of self-inflicted wounds on to the American and European economy. And again, I would suggest this is a good thing for everyone. This helps promote peace and prosperity and global growth.
Yeah. And now, Xiaolin, we're actually getting several questions related to healthcare. And I thought it was something that we saw from last year's census in China, that the birth rate has declined. I think that's not unique to China. I think it's more of an issue for highly urbanized countries. Having kids when you live in an apartment building is just difficult. But maybe before getting into what you read in President Xi's speech around healthcare, why we've seen this reaction in the last two trading days for healthcare stocks outperforming. But is it worth? Can you spend maybe a moment just kind of describing how the healthcare system works in China? That there's an element of that the government has a healthcare plan, but then there's also there's a private opportunity as well. But can you kind of explain a little bit of how the system works, and then we'll get into some of the specifics?
Absolutely. I'd say prior the healthcare reform happened in China in 2017-18, it was always a hospital system. That's it. Everything goes to the same place, regardless of big or small issues you have, how urgent, how not urgent, how you just want to speak with a specialist to check out, and everything, you go to the hospital. And the challenge is the hospital is just that big and they're accommodating everyone's needs every day. So they can't accommodate. What they did is you say, if you want to see a doctor, you got to come and register at the reception desk and get a number and wait for your number to be called, and then go and see your doctor. That presents a challenge because everyone wants to see the doctor on the same day. And then everyone goes in, then you line up and you get a number. And then if the hospital opened at 7 o'clock, you go at 6, you go at 5, you go even earlier to get a number, and you can't even afford to get a number. And then they just get delayed and very unhealthy, very unorganized in many, many ways. So as people become more urbanized, they live in the city and then have higher income, say, you know what, I need to have a better healthcare system. And particularly in China, the elderly would think, you know what, I need to be well looked after. And in the entire system, what the reform has done is a couple of things. One, to allow a private player to come in. Okay, so what that means is now if you're willing to pay a little bit extra, you have the savings, which the Chinese household does a lot. You know, they do nothing but savings. And then you can go to a specialist doctor right on the day, right on the spot, go and see them and then check out, have a better service in that way, in all aspects, not only hospital doctors. And second, what they did is using an advanced technology. What do I mean by that is you don't need to line up, like Harbin is my hometown. Everyone knows that it's cold. It's north of China. It's freezing cold, -30, -40 degree in winter. Think about that. You line up 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning to get a hospital number to see a doctor. It's ridiculous. And believe it or not, my parents does that when I was young. We just have to do that. If you want to see a doctor on the day, just go earlier. Today, you lie in the bed, you know, just don't feel well, go to an app, key in your address, and then tell your issue, and they find you a hospital can accept you today and go and see a doctor. You should done it at home. You do it on your app, and then you just go to the hospital when they will tell you your number will be called around 9:30 to 9:45, be there earlier, and you just be there slightly earlier to see the doctor. Hugely improved livelihood, you know, lifestyle become better, you can do other things, and you can feel very reassured, and you don't need to rush. They will find the entire system for you, so you can go and see where's the availability and go and see your doctors. And then the third thing they have done is to say, you know what, don't worry that if you feel like I need to save all the monies to pay my medical bill. They start to give your compensations, they cover more package, they could give you more options to choose from private healthcare, you know, scheme, all the government's one, so on and so forth, but they will reimburse your costs. Like my dad, unfortunately, had a surgery. It would normally cost him probably 200,000 in cost. But because the government subsidized or paid him back around 80–90%, he's not worried about his medical bill. Second, he can willing or wanted to do a high quality treatment, better treatment, you know, so on. So he doesn't need to calculate the coins you have in your pocket, which all helping, you know, the people become more healthier, more happy. And in Xi Jinping's report, he has repeatedly mentioned people is the focus, and he does want to obviously help them to become more wealthier. He mentioned that. He also wants to make sure they are more healthier and happier. How do you do that? You got to provide them the system, the resources they needed in the systems, so on and so forth. So I think that's really very positive to allow the privatization. When we say private, it doesn't mean the public company to private company. It's more of referring not state-owned players to come in, and then more program scheme to roll out in China to support that. And most important, he want the innovative and then the, you know, the technology advanced side to continue to develop. Pause there, Brendan.
And I think you know, some of the questions that we received, Xiaolin, were kind of geared to the zero COVID policy, and you know, we've always highlighted that you have this issue that there's been some skepticism about vaccinations across the elderly of China, and even a less lethal variant such as Omicron, you know, would have a very significant effect in China, just based on the sheer size of the population. Talking about 1.5 to 2 million potential lives were saved. At the same time, you know, we're starting to see a little bit of a change in some of the economic consequence around zero COVID. There seems to be some loosening of that, and you know, just in terms of, you know, your take on, was there anything, you know, to me it was kind of interesting that you know, many of the Western media, you know, immediately said, oh, you know, zero COVID's here to stay based on this speech. I don't think your take was quite as significant as some of the headlines that we saw.
I have to tell our audience here today, I've gone through the entire report and trying to get a clue on COVID. I am on your side. I am as eager as you to figure out what he is saying. He said, he didn't say, you know, try to get a clue. He literally just had one sentence, just said, you know, the dynamic COVID policy that's implemented in the country has saved life. which is factually very true, very true. And he did that, and that's all he said. Not more, not less. He just said that, and then he's just saying the factual truth is that policy literally saved life, and he had a tough job. Xi Jinping has a very tough job between left first or the growth first. Obviously, it's a hard call, but the core essential policy of Chinese Communist Party ruling China has always been social stability. And this is part of that, to deliver that, which he has did it successfully. He did not insist this policy will be in place forever. I chatted with a journalist from Reuters on Sunday morning, right after the speech. She's based in Hong Kong, so she's taking a lot of local takes from the asset management industry and so on and so forth. Her take is very different. She thinks this is actually good news. This now leave the room for policymakers to be more nimble, more flexible in dealing with the situation locally. He could have easily said, this policy stays intact. It doesn't take him a lot to say that. Okay, he could easily say that. He didn't. He just appraised the fact. And then this journalist believe, now with the development happening in China, she witnessed, for instance, Macau used to have 7 days plus 3 days plus 4 days, the quarantine, so on and so forth. Now they scrapped the 4, so it's only 7 days plus 3. Hong Kong is 3 days home. Remember, it used to be 4 weeks hotel quarantine, now it's 3 days home. And then Hong Kong is now asking mainland China to ease the entry requirements if people enter from Hong Kong to mainland. If that happened, people go freely to Hong Kong, 3 days, stay home, stay anywhere you live, and then very easily get to mainland. That's relaxed. And if you think about it, the more of the underlying developments that catch a lot of headline news, you can read it yourself, Google it. China issued over 1,300 student visa to Indian students to say you can come back and resume your study. Why would they do that if they're going to be more stricter than before? If you ask me, I think a lot of signs and slowly, gradually developments showing us, yes, they would not just say forget about it overnight, but there will be more positive, gradually, slowly of easy along the way that make the economy, the travels, the interactions with domestic and outside the world much more easier from now going forward. It's my take.
Yeah. And certainly we know there's a number, I think we've counted about there's nine different Chinese pharmaceutical companies are working on mRNA vaccines, and
that's true.
I think again, not at the Party Congress, in a few days' time we'll wrap up. You're going to potentially, I don't think we anticipate like an immediate, zero COVID is not going to immediately go away. It's just more of this trajectory of this soft change is apt to continue, and potentially enhanced by the approval from the China's FDA of an mRNA vaccine. But I think it's
more of like the tone is now set. I mean, you also watch China in and out and daily and very frequent basis, and then with the economic working group set to convene together in December, is probably about a month and a half away from today. Don't you feel that would be giving the next level of guidance and directions on what Xi Jinping said in his report? Would you agree?
Yeah,
with
100.
That?
Yeah, I think you've got at the end of the month you'll have the Politburo meeting, and then we'll see that further opportunities for policy articulation in December. But I think the key to me, Xiaolin, just is there's been a lot of emphasis on the negatives, and at the same time, I think there are some things that we're seeing that you could construe as positive. David spoke to certainly this morning we had a spokesperson from the Chinese government had some very positive comments about the U.S.-China, the importance of maintaining those relationships. I think we've spoken at length about that China is just so different than Russia's economy that you can't decouple from the U.S. from China and vice versa. It's the two economies are highly intertwined. Certainly, we haven't really spoken on in the past. We speak a lot about the Holding Foreign Companies Accountable Act, and we see a real opportunity that these the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board is in Hong Kong doing audit reviews of the companies we hold within KWEB. They're auditors, and those are the big four U.S. accounting firms. And I think that's been a significant issue for the companies within KWEB that I think it's kept many investors on the sidelines, and the potential resolution of holding foreign company accountable in a positive way would allow many institutional investors to come off the sidelines. And I just feel like it's, KWEB is almost like that proverbial coiled spring. I wish I could say today's the day, but certainly no one knows that. But I would think that the PCAOB wants to go home for Thanksgiving in several weeks' time, and potentially we get some good news. At the same time, we also have Singles Day is just around the corner. The actual pre-sales kicks off in a few days, so potentially a positive. And another issue, more so in 2021, was China's internet regulation. And I think it's clear to me, my sense, Xiaolin, was that it's probably the lack, the platform economy, the way that the companies within KWEB are described was in a very positive light in President Xi's speech.
I'd agree with you, Brendan. I think from March until October, March, we mark the time when Premier Li, Liu He, and then subsequent in April and May, Xi Jinping came out all clearly said, this is rectification, now it's implementation. And the market kept a bit skeptical on if we will see more regulation. At least over the last 7 months, I have not seen any new regulation introduced. It's more of in the category within you, how you have implemented and progress from there. And in all his report, I go back to what you have said at the very beginning, the word counting. I was looking for the regulations or the reforms, the technologies. He has mentioned nothing of that. So it's very safely assumed now what he has said in April, May, that this is, now moved on already to implementing. We're done with the framework, regulation framework introduction, now is in place, and everyone knows the framework and the guideline to operate within. With that confidence, I think that's really the macro risks that has driven, the names in, for instance, in KWEB fund, that due to the regulations, the impact of uncertainty, investors didn't like the surprise, and all those, I think, been pressing very negative with valuation. Those factors is quite safely to say is now behind us.
Yeah, and Brendan, if I could just add, going back to the HFCAA, the Holding Foreign Companies Accountable Act, it's certainly positive that PCAOB officials are in Hong Kong and they have access to work papers, and sort of we know all of the kind of the nitty gritty of that process. But to me, it's an even more important point that what we have seen as it has developed, as this issue has developed, is it's American regulators providing a roadmap to Chinese companies for how they can sort of more fully continue to participate in American capital markets. So, you can sort of choose to be alarmed by the HFCAA and the potential for delisting and all of the sky is falling type of commentary, or you could choose to look at it and say, here's what the United States has done. The United States has provided exactly the steps, exactly the roadmap that Chinese companies should follow, and now we know will be following, for purposes of ensuring their continued participation in sort of the deepest, most important capital markets in the world, the capital market in the United States, in New York. So, again, I think this augurs well for, let's just say, the next 5 years or 10 years of continued integration of the U.S. and Chinese economy. There's going to be a lot of politics and a lot of talk and a lot of pandering to voters in the U.S. and Europe, and to some extent, I'll say in China. But I choose to look at what's actually happening, not what is being said. And what's actually happening, I think, is captured very well in the way this HFCAA issue has developed. It undoubtedly, in my view, is coming to a constructive conclusion with the continued, participation by these global businesses, these Chinese companies in the American capital markets.
This is an area where I think you can get it's mutually beneficiary to resolve this issue. And I think we've always pointed out, Alibaba, several years ago, noted that, they feel like they're adhering to US GAAP rules. They're audited by PwC. Again, all of the companies within KWeb are really audited by the China arms of the big four US accounting firms. And these companies have nothing there to hide in an audit review. It's simply, the inputs and outputs to the balance sheet and net income statement. We've taken the more conservative, as a fiduciary, we've taken a conservative approach of converting many of our US ADRs to the Hong Kong, just in case there was policy error and that could obviously come from either side, but just taking the more conservative path. Certainly we have the ability to increase as more Chinese companies relist in Hong Kong. We could bring this percentage even higher than where it is today. The actual conversion process is quite easy. It's really to convert your, say, Alibaba US, your BABA ticker to 9988. It's simply filling out a form, and it's a book entry change, and you're on your way. You now have the Hong Kong share class. So I think we've taken a more conservative approach, but I still do believe that there's just such a great opportunity, really, with KWeb, just if foreign investor sentiment can improve. I just feel like KWeb's almost like a coiled spring, and we've had all of these other factors weighing on the space, and I just think we're ripe for some good news, and potentially it comes from Alibaba's Singles Day. Maybe it comes from a positive resolution to Holding Foreign Companies Accountable Act. I think there could be any number. I mean, obviously the companies themselves are very inexpensive. We continue to see the companies themselves purchase back shares, as well as we continue to see investors in China buying the companies. That you have this southbound stock connect, so it allows investors in China to buy stocks in Hong Kong. And we continue to see very strong inflows into Hong Kong stocks from mainland investors, and particularly in companies like Tencent. That Tencent has seen very strong inflows even over the last week. So we kind of feel like if these investors are who are closest to the companies are buying them, the companies themselves are buying back shares, there's potentially maybe we should as well. And I think it's certainly we feel like there's been an overemphasis on the negatives and not enough attention to some of the positives. So I know Xiaolin, just kind of from your take on the KWeb opportunity, it's certainly something that I'm personally a big believer in the opportunity with these companies. As hopefully we get some of these catalysts kind of come to light, just feel like there's just a really, really strong opportunity in KWeb today. Just hard for me not to think of what hasn't, we've had everything but the kitchen sink thrown at it proverbially.
I agree with you. I think the market, if you look at the valuations, so on and so forth, of our KWEB fund, is really what has not pressed in is marginally positive. The market has been negative on regulations, on a lot of things, and I don't blame investors being very conservative and cautious on into regulations, reformed policy, these up to CCP, want to get a guidance on policies where it is, and so on, so to stand. And Xi Jinping in his report also mentioned he wants a state-owned enterprise, obviously, to be a leader, set by example in achieving these goals he just literally laid out. He also said all these, non-state-owned enterprise continue to be contributing to the growth of the economy. So that sounded to me, companies like these big names in KWEBs are leaders not only in China, also internationally. And as well as these are the companies, Alibaba itself, directly, indirect job creation is #1 in China. Alibaba, #1 in China. And if he has to deal with the young people, unemployment, for them to find a job, the most straightforward, easy for them to make a quick start or make a start in career in job is the Alibaba. They have hundreds of millions of merchants on their platforms, and then these are the companies that actually can be the facilitator for Xi Jinping to achieve all the goals he set up. We often get asked another question was the common prosperity. Mm-hmm. Is that a hurdle for China's economic growth? If you ask me, the pen has finished. The equal pay could be a way of saying, the lower pay got to be rebalanced back and so on and so forth. I don't think common prosperity is a hurdle. It's a new direction and driver for China's growth. How do you, like you said, at the beginning, Brendan, you got to have the prosperity first, right. Then we can share, And he has all wanted for people to have that welfare. He's very care you get out of the bottom, but then you always have someone at the bottom, but he want that bottom income group of people to have better income. And then a lot of the analysts now is digesting his report. I've seen a few, audience, you guys feel free to reach out or Google it yourself. He's Morgan Stanley and a lot of big houses now is estimating what does he really mean by economic. So some come up, say, China's GDP from now on until the 2035, the first milestone age, Xi Jinping set out to become a medium modernized society, would mean GDP got to grow around 4.7% year over year until then. And also the GDP per capita got to grow to 20,000, excuse me, what am I talking about? 20,000 from today's level of 12.5. So that indicating the wealth creation, the opportunity, the job, and so on and so forth, embedded with his ambitious goals, is all towards to growing the growth. And then these names in KWEB is 40% of China's GDP. So you almost at front and center to become and continue to be the big drivers to grow the economy. So I'm, I feel very pleased and with Xi Jinping's report. I think it's very balanced, give a lot of guidance. And then obviously I'd be very curious to see subsequently how the other policies carry out in delivering such.
Okay. And, I know we're just getting over an hour time. Again, we're always available. You can always email us at info@KraneShares.com. And certainly, you have a way to keep abreast of developments by signing up for ChinaLastNight.com. It's our free research blog. But one last question that we did get, kind of an great question, just around inflation's really been such a topic du jour here in the United States as well as in Europe, but China's inflation has been quite tame. Their CPI was under 3% for the month of September. Really, food prices, pork prices, but is there any kind of concern, maybe Xiaolin, that as China opens up, that will create an inflationary effect? My thought was that as China reopens up, it's not, you're going to see more emphasis on domestic consumption, as opposed to historically the kind of infrastructure real estate emphasis. And I think, you know, there were elements of President Xi's speech really did show that, you know, as China comes back online, it's going to be a little, you know, maybe a different emphasis of where policy pro economic policies are geared, more consumption than as opposed to real estate.
I agree with everything you said, Brendan. Simple as that. And also the inflation front, you do see pork price and vegetable gone up slightly. It's also seasonal. The October is the golden week, is holiday. So people tend to gather together. You buy more, you consume more, you celebrate together. Overall, they have very concerned, import from the core basket of the CPI. So overall, they are very manageable level in China. I expect that to continue to be the case. Obviously, some seasonal adjusted factor when winter comes and Chinese New Year come, those are the period you see a bit of a spike. But overall, I think they managed a lot better than a lot of ours. I live in UK. My energy bill just gone up by 80%. So sorry to think about with everything else together is very poorly managed. But on the other side is the Chinese policymakers have the dry powder. We have been repeatedly said they are the contrarian to the rest of the central bank in the world, that they can actually help. If they chose to help the household, very straightforward, very easily, they can do that. If they chose to subsidize, to become less burden on household level, they have the power to do that. They have not exercised or used, or not even overused, used in their policy toolkit if they chose to. So they have a lot of options available for them to help if shall that become a problem. But at the current level, it's not a problem.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we're seeing some of these pro-consumption policies, these proverbial green shoots in terms of, certainly they extended the sales tax exemption for electric vehicles. You had hotels were given preferential rates for upgrading their equipment, and we saw some support for home appliances. So these are all very, very pro-consumer. And I think that's something that, ultimately a lot of the companies within K-Web are the end beneficiaries. With that, I know we went over an hour. We just want to be conscious of our investors and their time, and we certainly, again, we're certainly always available. If you have a wake up tomorrow, please don't hesitate to reach out just via info@KraneShares.com. And certainly, we always recommend for investors to take a look at ChinaLastNight.com. And with that, we'll conclude today's session, and certainly very much appreciate the opportunity to connect with both David and Xiaolin.